As usual, Jamie woke in discomfort, the sheets tangled around him and the sour shame of another restless night clinging to his skin. The room was dim, heavy with the perfume his mother insisted on spraying before he slept, as if sweetness could disguise the iron discipline of the place. At the first sound of his stirring, she appeared in the doorway. "Oh dear," she said softly, though there was no kindness in it. "Are we to begin the morning like this again? Perhaps I shall ask Aunt Margaret to help. You know she has no patience for scenes." Margaret was her elder sister, a hard woman with a face like carved stone and a voice that could flatten any protest. 6 months earlier, she had come into the household like a storm and reorganized Jamie's life down to its smallest details. Since then, every hour of his day seemed measured, corrected, and arranged according to standards he neither understood nor dared resist. His mother sat beside him and cupped his face in her hands, studying him with a strange, possessive tenderness. "If only you would cooperate," she murmured. "You could be so lovely." Jamie lowered his eyes. He had learned that silence was safer. At last she rose, crossed to the wall, and took down the key. The collar at his throat clicked open with a metallic snap, leaving a red impression against his skin. He rubbed at it instinctively, though he knew better than to complain. The chain fixed to the bed had become part of the nightly ritual, as ordinary in this house as the shutting of curtains. "Bath," she said. "And when I come back, I want to see proper suds this time. Your clothes are laid out. We are expected, and I will not have you looking careless." The bath water smelled of oil and flowers so thickly that it made him dizzy. He washed quickly, scrubbing himself until his skin flushed pink, then returned to the room and stopped short at the sight of the garments waiting for him. Lace. Ribbons. A stiff white dress trimmed in purple. He felt tears rise before he could stop them. He was still standing there with the towel clutched at his waist when Aunt Margaret appeared. "Well," she said. "Upstairs. Quickly. We have an appointment, and I won't have you wasting time." She followed him close enough that he could feel her presence like a blade at his back. In minutes she had laced him into a corset so tight he could barely breathe. Layer by layer she dressed him with brisk efficiency, fastening, pinning, straightening, until the figure in the mirror no longer seemed entirely his own. When she brushed out his pale hair and tied it back with purple ribbons, she leaned away to inspect her work with cold satisfaction. "There," she said. "Now you look presentable." He stared at his reflection in silence. The face in the glass was pale and frightened, made doll-like by powder and color. It was not a disguise, exactly. It was something worse, a version of himself others seemed determined to invent. Downstairs, his mother was already waiting by the car. Aunt Margaret buckled him into place with practiced hands and shut the door firmly behind him. During the drive, neither woman said much. They did not need to. Jamie knew from the set of Margaret's jaw and the pleased stillness of his mother's smile that this day mattered to them. The boutique stood on a narrow street behind polished glass, its front window filled with mannequins in extravagant gowns. Waiting at the door was Miss Catherine, elegant and severe in dark clothes that made her seem even taller than she was. "Good," she said as they approached. "You've brought him on time." Her eyes moved over Jamie in one swift, assessing glance. "He'll do," she said. "Bring him inside." The shop was brighter than the house, but no less intimidating. Women stood in clusters near the racks, immaculate and self-possessed, their attention turning toward him all at once. Jamie felt the weight of their gaze like heat against his skin. Miss Catherine led him toward a row of dresses. "You will choose," she said crisply. 10 of them. Each one finer than the last. Then you will walk out and show them properly. If you hesitate, I will know. If you embarrass me, I will remember." His hands trembled as he reached for the first gown, a long pink dress, absurdly soft and elaborate, blooming with lace and bows. Miss Catherine took it from him, helped him into it, and adjusted the fall of the fabric with expert hands. When she stepped back, the room fell quiet for a moment. "There," she said. "Now stand straight." Jamie obeyed. A small stage had been set at the far end of the boutique. He could see the polished boards gleaming under the lights. As Miss Catherine motioned him forward, he felt the room close in around him, the eyes, the silence, the expectation. He took one step, then another, following the sharp rhythm of her heels across the floor, like a prisoner learning the pattern of a cage. He was made to cross the small stage again and again until Miss Catherine was satisfied. Each turn had to be slower, each step straighter, each pause more graceful than the last. When she finally allowed him to leave the platform, she instructed him to curtsy, and Jamie did so as best he could, his movements stiffened by the cruel grip of the corset. For the next hour, the ritual continued. One dress followed another, each more theatrical than the last, each chosen not for comfort but for effect. The fabrics grew lighter, stranger, more humiliating in their delicacy, until he felt less like a person than a figure arranged in a window. The final outfit was hardly an outfit at all, more ornament than clothing, and it drew quiet delight from the women gathered there. They studied him openly, as if he were an object brought out for inspection. When Miss Catherine beckoned Jamie's mother onto the stage to present him properly, she did so with unmistakable pride, as though this display were an achievement long in the making. Jamie endured it in silence, cheeks burning, his hands trembling at his sides. He could feel every eye on him, measuring, approving, judging. Even the others in the room, those led in on straps and ribbons and stern commands, watched him with a bleak, curious intensity, as though they recognized in him some reflection of their own fate. At last it ended. He was dressed again in the clothes Aunt Margaret had chosen earlier, though they offered little comfort now. Miss Catherine returned him to the center of the room and placed him back into his mother's keeping with a satisfied smile. "What a beautiful little specimen," she said. "You and Margaret have brought him very far. But now that you have come this distance, you should consider joining us properly. He would benefit from the company of others like himself, and you would both learn a great deal from the women here." She spoke lightly, almost warmly, but Jamie heard the promise beneath her words. This was not the end of anything. It was only an introduction. "Come next week," Miss Catherine continued. "There are more suitable things to be chosen. Better tools. Better methods. The next stage requires seriousness." 2 weeks later, Jamie woke crying again. Morning light had already filled the room. He felt cold, ashamed, and unbearably small. When the door opened, he looked up expecting the familiar softness of his mother's old dressing gown. Instead, she entered transformed. She wore black leather from throat to floor, severe and gleaming in the pale light. High-heeled boots struck the boards with hard, deliberate clicks. Her hair was drawn sharply back, and in one hand she carried a narrow whip. For a moment Jamie stared at her, unable to reconcile this woman with the mother he had once known. "Enough," she said. The word cracked through the room with more force than a shout. When he did not stop crying quickly enough, the whip snapped against the bed frame beside him, close enough to make him flinch. "I see now," she said calmly, "that I have been too gentle with you." She crossed the room, took the key from its hook, and unlocked the collar at his throat. The metal fell away, but the relief was brief. "Aunt Margaret and Miss Catherine were right," she went on. "You require firmer guidance. There will be no more lenience, no more scenes, and no more foolish resistance." Jamie lowered his eyes. He could not bear to look at her. "Get up," she ordered. "Wash dress in your maid's uniform. There is work waiting, and you will begin today." He obeyed because there was nothing else left to do. As he moved toward the bath, he understood with a sinking certainty that something had shifted. The strange performance at the boutique had not been a single ordeal, not an isolated humiliation to survive and forget. It had been a doorway, and now it had closed behind him. Whatever came next would be harder, colder, and far more complete. And somewhere below, in the silent rooms of the house, the new phase of his life was already waiting.